He falls to his knees. In the distance the flames dance, mocking the giant whose defeat they celebrate. The Emperor of Rome is kneeling before a vessel filled with liquid gold. Around him, the faces of his soldiers, a mixture of admiration and terror. He knows what's coming, and then the darkness envelops him, a scream torn between his throat and the golden silence. That's how Shapur the Fine, the King of Kings, subdued the Roman Emperor Valerian, not with weapons, but with the liquid fire of his gold. The year is 260 AD, and the place is the same, a battlefield near the Persian fortress of Hormisdas. But let's take a step back to fully understand how the mighty Roman emperor, successor of Augustus and Nero, came to kneel before his Persian enemy. We'll have to travel back in time to a Rome that was tired of being a colossus. By the middle of the 3rd century, Rome was not as powerful as before. The barbarians pushed from the north, the Goths besieged the Danube, and within the empire, economic crises and usurpers threatened to tear it apart. However, the greatest danger loomed to the east. Shapur I, King of Kings of Persia, led a formidable army. He dreamed of conquering Egypt and knocking Rome out of the Middle East. Rome was indeed shaken. Its armies had become accustomed to fighting barbarians along the Rhine and Danube. They were green, inexperienced in desert warfare. Emperor Valerian was a former Praetorian prefect. He was old, 62 years at the start of the war. Despite his age, he loved luxury and pleasures, more interested in beautiful horses and gladiatorial games than in the military. So when Shapur invaded, Rome reacted with terror rather than strategy. The emperor, dressed in armor, mounted his horse and headed east with a massive army. However, the very first steps of the Roman legionaries were a disaster. The arid terrain of Mesopotamia drained their numbers. Disease, exhaustion, and thirst ravaged the troops, and when they finally encountered Shapur's army, the outcome was already decided. The Roman cavalry charged head-on, eager to prove their valor, but the Parthians, riding swift horses, simply avoided them, firing arrows and retreating to safety. The infantry fared no better. The disciplined squares of Roman shields and swords were decimated by Iranian bows and javelins. Each day, the golden banners of Persia seemed to dance on the ruins of defeated Rome. Valerian, realizing the defeat, tried to retreat to Mesopotamia, but Shapur's pursuit was relentless. Each night, the emperor's dreams were haunted by the glint of Persian steel and the menacing cry of "Rome is defeated." His advisors urged him to surrender, but the emperor's pride prevented it. He preferred death to submission. In a small village, just 12 miles from the fortress of Hormisdas, Valerian made his last stand. Surrounded by his Praetorian guard, he attempted a counterattack, but when the dust settled, there were few survivors. Of the Roman legionaries, Valerian, covered in wounds, stumbled onto the battlefield, and then the image seared itself into the eyes of his enemies, the majestic Roman eagle pinned beneath the hooves of a Persian horse. Valiantly, the emperor drew his sword, but his guard fell one by one, and the cries of "Veni Vidi Vici" echoed in vain. When the last Roman shield fell, Shapur stepped forward. The King of Kings had the Emperor of Rome at his mercy. One might think that Shapur would kill him quickly. After all, the victory belonged to him, but the king knew that the true trophies were not won in battles, but in the shadows of death. While chroniclers debate whether Valerian was captured alive, or if Shapur merely believed he had, one thing is certain: the emperor was taken to the fortress of Hormisdas. Whether it was a cage of gold or a dungeon of shadow is uncertain, but the result was clear. The King of Kings had broken the Roman giant. The news traveled faster than eagles, leaving behind tales of a new king of the East and the West. Rome, the city that had seen emperors deified and divinized, now had to accept the humiliation of its sovereign enslaved. Even now, centuries later, the echo of that fall resonates. The paintings depicting Valerian's fall become more vivid as we add color to the emperor's defeat. However, no painting can capture the essence of his fall. We know little about Shapur's treatment of Valerian, yet it is precisely this uncertainty that makes his defeat so terrifying. There are no surviving accounts of the days leading up to his death. We don't know if the emperor was shackled in a dark cell or paraded through the streets as a living trophy. History offers us only fragments, allowing our imagination to fill in the gaps. Yet it is precisely this void that makes Valerian's fate so haunting. Shapur, the brilliant strategist, allowed his prisoners to live. He used them as bargaining chips, symbols of his conquest. But Valerian was different. He represented an entire empire. Shapur wanted everyone to remember the fall of the Roman giant. Then came the day of the sacrifice, or perhaps it was merely a day in the life of a captive emperor. One early morning, while the sun painted the sky with hues of gold, Valerian was summoned to meet his captor. The two kings met in a vast courtyard. Around them, the Persian court buzzed with curiosity. The air vibrated with whispers and the clatter of armored boots. Valerian, though shriveled by captivity, still carried himself with the dignity of a Roman emperor. His face, etched with wrinkles of fatigue and fear, bore witness to months of captivity. His once resplendent purple robes hung in rags on his emaciated frame, mirroring the tattered state of his empire. The scene was set for a play in which the roles were reversed. The victor sat on a magnificent golden throne. Adorned with precious stones and intricate carvings, it was a symbol of ancient Persian opulence. Opposite him, the defeated emperor knelt on the ground. He was barefoot and shackled, stripped of his imperial garments. Only the echo of his former grandeur remained. With the audience in place, the play began. Shouts and applause rose from the crowd. The emperor's heart pounded in his chest. This was not a battle he could win. At that moment, the roar of the crowd was drowned out by the ringing of a bell. Silence descended over the courtyard. All eyes were on the king, who spoke in a language that resonated with the power of a whip. No, not even the gods themselves could withstand his fury. The audience cheered, their voices echoing his triumph. After the speech, a procession entered, carrying a huge cauldron. It was like nothing Valerian had ever seen. Crafted from pure gold, it shimmered like a giant ball of fire. Intricate patterns adorned its surface, images of mythical creatures and scenes of ancient battles. The procession moved majestically around the courtyard, attracting gasps of awe from the audience. The onlookers were spellbound, sensing that what was about to happen next would be a sight never to be forgotten. When the cauldron reached the center of the courtyard, a soldier tall and strong raised its lid. From below, a fire burned fiercely, fueling the golden vessel. The metal glowed, radiating intense heat. A chorus of excited shouts erupted from the crowd. In the midst of the commotion, the soldier holding the cauldron leaned toward the captives, his face impassive. Then, slowly and ceremoniously, he began to pour. Valerian closed his eyes tightly, bracing for the inevitable. Molten gold cascaded down, scorching hot and unstoppable. The emperor cried out, his voice hoarse with fear and pain. It felt as though the sun itself had been unleashed, searing his flesh with unbearable heat. What happened next was neither recorded in chronicles nor witnessed by outsiders. The emperor's screams were swallowed by the roaring fire and the cheers of the crowd. All that remained was the image of the burning giant and the fading memory of a fallen empire. Such was the demise of the emperor, the man who had embodied the might of Rome and who, in the twilight of his life, found himself kneeling before the fire of his own destruction. His story, a tragic testament to the hubris of empires, lives on not in marble or bronze, but in the echoes of a burning emperor and the silence of a fallen kingdom. And what can we learn from the echoes of his downfall? We eagerly await your thoughts in the comments.